The Bob Murphy Show, episode 460.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews, conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Bob Murphy Show. Another crossover. This time Adam and Heyman and I are talking about clips from Stefan Molyneux and Tucker Carlson. The first set of clips has to do with the morality of warfare, and the second has to do with the morality of tariffs. I think you'll enjoy both. Here we go.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
Well, sir, what do you know? What are we talking about this week?
We have a selection of clips from two influential thinkers, Stefan Molyneux and then Tucker Carlson. And the first one is an excerpt. It was the listener we had from Serbia. We have listeners scattered all over the globe.
Yeah, you don't know.
Marko Yankovic, I believe is how you say his name. He suggested that we cover Stefan Molyneux in one of his recent shows, was fielding questions from listeners and gave what was a surprising answer to my ears, and it is fodder for something Adam and I talk about, and so I think we'll just dive right in. The context for this clip is the caller calls in and says, yes, Stefan, I liked your novel that you wrote on this issue, and in one of the scenes, the good guy government or leaders, I don't know if it's even a government, it might be like a free society kind of thing, but they are threatened by this outside, aggressors, and they say, if you don't back off, we're going to release this genetically engineered bioweapon that is like calibrated to the DNA of like the leader of the bad guys, the bad government or whatever it is. And, so it's going to kill you and possibly, your near relatives. Cause it's, again, this thing is designed to go after a particular DNA sequence or something. Okay. And so then the caller is saying, hey, is that something you've researched? Is that a real type of weapon, or did you just completely make that up? But then also, can you talk about like the ethics behind that? Cause I found that intriguing. So that's the context for this. I think we have two clips from Stefan, but we'll, do one and then talk and do the second one. I find that protocol works.
Playing, talking. All right, let's see what Stefan Molyneux is up to these days.
Sure. Okay, so it's a great question. And I was talking about targeted biological weapons and biological weapons development back when I was talking to Joe Rogan in like 2014, like 10 plus years ago, long before COVID. And so my understanding is that targeted biological weapons are certainly possible, that you could take somebody's gene sequence and you could try to develop some sort of weapon that would target themselves. I put in the novel, the main character says, we're going to release this, if you continue with your aggression against our society, we're going to release this weapon against you. Now, we're not sure how many people it's going to target. It could target just you. It could target basically your family as a whole. And that's the threat. Now, I don't know, even as a writer, I don't know if that is a real threat or not a real threat. It is a very effective threat. So, of course, if you get in trouble with organized crime, they will go against your family. If they can't get you, or of course the governments in totalitarian regimes will often punish your families for the wrongs that you do. And now, of course, I'm not saying that's moral, but with regards to fighting back against a hostile government power that is threatening your society, say, well, but we can't have indiscriminate. It's like, but no, the whole point is that it's indiscriminate. So if they come over and they rain down bombs, that's going to be indiscriminate. Kids are going to be killed. If they have an EMP attack and target the grid, then people are going to be killed, some of whom will be children because they can't get, the medicine will go bad. They can't get any treatment at the hospital because maybe the hospital's out of backup power or something like that. The traffic lights don't work, so they'll die in the ambulance because the ambulance has to go that much more slowly. So if there's any kind of war by its very nature, particularly modern war, is indiscriminate. And so I look not at the individual actions. What I do is I look at the relationship. So with this one, there's a foreign power that is, it's over fishing disputes and so on, and they are threatening war against a free society. And so the leaders of those are threatened with targeted bioweapons that at least are threatened to be potentially indiscriminate. And you say, oh gosh, but that could target kids. And it's like, but the foreign power is targeting children because let's say they set off a dirty bomb. Let's say they poison the water supply. I mean, any number of things that they could do is going to end up harming children. So somebody who says your children are fair game, can they really say my children are not, though? That's totally immoral, right? So in any war, you're going to get kids hurt. And so somebody who's starting a war is already saying kids are legitimate targets because that's the way that war goes, particularly these days. It has always been the case, but particularly more so these days. And even in the past, you say, well, let's say we'll look at sort of the Battle of Agincourt or things like the Battle of Hastings. These were sort of semi-professional soldiers all fighting. It's like, well, yes, but, one of them gets killed and then there's no one to provide for his 6 children. And so they suffer enormously. So war causes children to suffer enormously. Anybody who threatens war is threatening children. And so saying, well, it would be completely immoral to threaten children. It's like, but they've already crossed that bridge. They've already threatening your children. So they have no right to say it's immoral to threaten children. And so I think that's the general moral reasoning. And of course, the purpose is to not have the war occur.
So, Bob, today I learned if I'm ever going to go threaten Stefan Molyneux, don't go myself and don't send any member of my family. In fact, send somebody who has a whole bunch of genetic diversity that's nothing like mine. Because otherwise...
Yeah. I was thinking it's good that I'm bald because I'm not like leaving around strands of my DNA for the CIA or whatever to grab. So
yeah, you'd have been living easy in Gattaca. Be like, no problem.
Yeah. So before we dive into morality, it is an interesting concept that if they could develop things that, and he didn't elaborate there, but like what's the delivery mechanism? Is it the kind of the deal where, oh, we're just gonna like have one of our agents go over to your country, just open this vial somewhere, and then it'll just kind of pass harmlessly. Like maybe it's a cold or something to normal people, but if it hits the people whose DNA has been targeted, that it's fatal or something. Like it's not really clear how does it get transmitted, but that's kind of interesting. Like you could, imagine like, the people in their bunkers and whatever, and like, oh, we can't hit them with conventional things, but no, if you had something that just passes from person to person, they would have to be. But again, the libertarians are completely safe, ensconced in their basements and not having any real friends. So
that's right. That's why you never open the window. Yeah, I believe if this isn't a thing already, it's so easily conceivable that it will be a thing in 10 or 15 years. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, but
Bob,
just to finish that train of thought, so then, you say, well, how would the governments use that? Well, if they, the me 21andMe and what I mean, like if they have everybody's DNA, then they could just,
sure,
release that. It's the benefit too is it's not even like you don't have to go arrest somebody and convict them in court or something. It's just, no, you just concoct this thing in the lab and just release it. Like that would be pretty hard to trace. And so there you go.
And it does have the efficiency of sorts that you are targeting the leaders, assuming you've calibrated it correctly. And the question is, you're also targeting their innocent family members or whatever. So, yeah, what do you think about Molyneux's argument there?
I was shocked by it And and to be clear, it wasn't. One could make. I was not shocked that someone would say, "Hey, if some outside entity is threatening to destroy our society, and the only way we can defend ourselves is to use some retaliatory threat or some deterrence that can't be isolated to the particular aggressors, but might have some collateral damage." That doesn't shock me. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, right? Like, I could argue with that, and if we want to, we can get into it. But that wouldn't shock me. What shocked me is the way he framed his argument.
Yeah.
That, so just to state it, that it's right. The person threatening the aggression would be a hypocrite if he said, "Hey, you're not allowed to do what I'm doing to you," right? So some guy, comes in and says, "If you give me your money, or I'm going to kill your kid." If I said, "Well, if you take my money, then I'm going to kill your kid," the guy would be a hypocrite if he was like, "Oh, you can't do that." But that's not the end of the story. It is still wrong for me to threaten some guy's kid. And you say, "Well, why?" But he's the aggressor. Right, but the little kid wasn't the aggressor. Right? So that's why it's wrong. Like, you can't do things to innocent people regardless of what somebody else may have done. That's kind of like the distinction between guilty people and innocent people.
Right.
And I mean, I could come up with more elaborate scenarios where you could justify doing something to anybody on planet Earth based on what some guy, 6,000 miles away did. And that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's the way I approached it, at least at first. Like, I can construct some crazy hypothetical scenario by which maybe it's not right, but I would be willing to kill an innocent in order to, if I thought legitimately is the only way I could save my life, my wife's life, my cul-de-sac here, my neighborhood, my city, my state, the entire country. I can keep on adding up people's whose lives I saved by killing some innocent kids. I could invent that story. But it seems like pretty weird that he just goes straight for it. Like, that's the first thing I'm going to do is threaten your kids. I didn't read his novel, but are we just saying that there's no other way they could have handled it that would have been not threatening innocent people? Shouldn't that have been made crystal clear? Or is it just, we're going to do this because the bioweapon thing is easy, and yeah, we'll just do that then. That's what we're going to do.
I mean, I don't know, and I totally get what you're saying. I suppose to Steelman it, maybe Stefan would come back and say, well, right, they could have launched, tactical nukes or something, but that would have killed way more innocent people, and this was targeting it, right to, and maybe they weren't sure that, it might kill the guys, up to his first cousins, but even there, that actually is pretty targeted, he might argue. So I don't know, and I get what you're saying. He did just jump right there. But again, like the arguments we have every time there's the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even though I don't like what the people have to say about that, at least that kind of makes sense. That if you thought, Japan attacked us when we're at war, and if we don't do something and stop them, they're going to start bombing more of our cities and killing our people, and we can't just challenge Hirohito to an arm wrestling match. That's not going to stop the thing. And what can we do except use overwhelming force? And there's no way we can avoid killing Japanese civilians. Sorry. It's impossible. They're the ones who's right. So I get that. And again, we can talk about that, but again, that wasn't the move he made there.
Fact,
that's what was just so interesting to me.
In fact, I'll spell it out, because he said he wasn't doing a thing where, okay, I can construct a scenario where I might do such a horrible thing, because literally that's the only way I can save humanity or whatever. No, he said he doesn't think about a person's actions as objectively moral or immoral. He doesn't look at morality objectively. He looks at morality as a relationship proposition. And once the bad guys have said that they're going to do X or Y and Z to you, then it's perfectly moral to do X or Y or Z to them. And I thought, that's sad. You don't need to make that move. Like, you and I talk about these superhero stories we like so much, and one of the defining characteristics of a superhero is they do act better than the villains they're fighting.
Right.
Just because Dr. Doom is willing to slaughter everybody in your country doesn't mean you nuke Latvia as Iron Man or something. And I just found it weird that I think Stefan is a moral philosopher, right? Or at least an amateur one, or is that how he couches himself? And so I thought, like you, it was a weird move to just go right to, well, Dad threatened us, and so we're just going to threaten his kids. So I mean, that's just moral. Who cares?
Yeah. Yes. So what you're getting into is a broader discussion, and let's return to that. But just to unpack again the specific move he made there and why I think it's just clearly incorrect is there's a sense in which, sure, even if we're going to take his framing and say, yep, we have the default, and there's some obviously a lot more context, folks, that we didn't include here just for the sake of brevity. But later he says things like, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt initially, but then if they slander me or lie, backstab me or whatever, I don't feel that I owe them a moral duty. Like maybe I will refrain from lying about them and gossiping just because, but it's not that I owe them that duty anymore. Like he sort of does a tit for tat thing, and he explained later. Okay, but even within that framework, and saying, all right, so the default is when I encounter a stranger, like I won't punch him in the face. But if he comes up and takes a swing at me, hey, now all bets are off. I can swing and hit him. But what I'm saying is it doesn't follow, even if you agree with that insofar as it goes, that, well, hey, if I encounter a stranger, my default is I'm not going to punch his infant in the stroller next to him in the face. But hey, if he comes at my infant, well, then all bets are off and I'm going to hit his infant. No, because the infant didn't take a swing. You see how that works, everybody? Like, in other words, it's per person. And that, yes, you treat someone with the default. And so, yeah, if the guy violates, your code, your aggression principle or whatever, then he can invite reciprocal retaliation to him, but not to somebody else who did not initiate aggression. Like, so that when you're saying, like, what rule did the guy break that he now forfeits the right to complain, it can't involve other people who didn't break that rule too.
Yeah, for sure. And I was amazed when he brought up the lying example, because what he says is somebody lies about me, then I think it's okay to lie about him, and maybe I will or maybe I won't, but I won't feel like I have a moral obligation not to. But when you lie, you're harming yourself and your own reputation by the lie. It's not just how you're perceived by your enemy or something. Now everybody who interacts with you is going to view you as a untrustworthy person when you speak. You're hurting yourself. And I feel like there's some truth to that.
Yeah. Can we pull on that thread a little bit? So folks, again, we don't have the clip here. I promise we're not lying about what Stefan said.
He was very direct. Yeah.
But yes, so when he was, again, generalizing this principle that, like, to not just about what happened in his novel, but then he applied it to, his own personal conduct, and then like nations at large, and they were even reflecting on the history of Christianity, and our Christian nation's going to fail because of this silly adherence to this rule and whatnot. And so again, the specific example he said is, yeah, when I deal with somebody, in the beginning, I treat them with courtesy and everything, and I certainly wouldn't just lie about somebody and spread gossip behind their back that's untrue. But if I catch them doing that to me, then it's an open question. It's not a matter of principle anymore or morality, it's just a matter of expediency. And maybe I would, maybe I won't. And so I think what you're just saying there, Adam, which is interesting, is if you think it through, what is the function of lying about somebody? It's not hurting that person. That person knows if what you're saying is untrue, right? The only function of lying about someone to hurt them is to get other people to believe false things. And so why would anybody else appreciate that? And so, again, that's just a weird thing to say, oh, what I'm going to do is manipulate the behaviors of others to make them treat this person more poorly than they would if they knew the truth. Because, hey, after all, he did that. So again, yes, it's causing harm to that person, but you're only doing it via manipulating other people by having them believe false things. So that's a weird way to proceed. Yeah, and again, to be fair, folks, Stefan didn't say, I do lie about people, right? So I think he kind of was admitting, I don't actually do this, which kind of makes sense, because otherwise you'd be wondering, well, why would I trust anything coming out of your mouth? How do I know if you're, especially if it's somebody you don't like, and it's clear you don't like them, then how do I know that in your mind that person didn't lie to you, about
For sure.
you? So anyway, so I think maybe he partly realized as the words were coming out of his mouth, oh, I don't want my listeners to feel like
that was my sense too, because I
Yeah.
think he's hung a lot of his reputation on the pursuit for truth. I think he is an honest person as part of his whole thing. And yeah, like you said before, it's his framing that's so weird. He said he was talking about the moral reasoning he was talking about, and he says, this, I think this is a quote. If not, it's real close.
But now he's allowed to paraphrase you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fair. Quote, kind of, I hope. They're already threatening your children, so it's okay to threaten their children. And after all, the purpose is to not have the war occur. He's defending the prospect of threatening, innocent children because, after all, they crossed that line first. So morality's out the window. And hey, this tactic might even prevent the war. So it's double good. But as you were saying, I think he's couching this moral reasoning just it's off kilter. I think.
Yeah, you were asking, isn't he a moral philosopher? Yes, his deal is he's got it's called universally preferable behavior. He thinks it's a secular ethics.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna the guy, that Marco guy who sent us this. I think he, among his problems, is he thought like Stefan was doing this weird mixture of like deontological and utilitarian reasoning there. Like you kind of just summarized it in your pseudo quote there, Adam, about like, hey, he can't complain that we're violating some moral rule because they are the ones that open up the floodgates by attacking or threatening our kids, and so that's why we're allowed to do it. And then also, of course, why we're doing this is we don't want there to be a war in the first place. So like we're minimizing the number of kids that end up dead by doing this. And so it's kind of doing like a mixture of, principle and expediency there. And I think that that's really not what Stefan is doing in his universal preferable behavior. But I have not read that I haven't read the primary text is what I'm getting at. Like I've seen him talk about it, and I've seen other people write about it, like either favorable or hostile reviews. But my sense is that it would be difficult to take what we just heard from Stefan and then plug it into that framework in terms of him saying this is how, the rational philosopher type would, through introspection, spin out a system of morality.
Right. And we have a shorter clip from the same source. Say, did you say Marcus Mackey out of Serbia sent this clip to you?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that guy. Great choice. All right, let's play the second clip. And...
Are you being serious?
No. No.
Okay.
It is a great clip, though. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't, you can't have higher moral standards than your enemies. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. If you are in a street fight, right, and you say, okay, yeah, no hitting below the belt, no hitting the face, right? And that's the rule. And then some guy punches you in the face and then tries to hit you in the groin. What do? Well, you are no longer bound by the rules because the other party has violated the rules. So what I really wanted to point out in that scene is that morality is understood in the future. This is my novel. Morality is understood as a relationship. And if somebody threatens your kids, yeah, their kid's a fair target. It's a shame. It's not what anybody wants who's moral, but if that's the way things are going to go. One of the things that I've never really liked is that the good guys play by all these rules that the bad guys don't play by. And we can see this happening even in contemporary politics, right? So,
yeah, I thought this part was fascinating. You can't have higher moral standards than your enemies. It just doesn't work. I disagree vehemently. I think you should have morals that you think make sense wherever you have discovered them. And although I can imagine, retreading the same ground, but I can imagine a scenario where, like Luke Skywalker, I'm going to blow up that whole Death Star, even though not everybody on there is innocent. Because I think it's the only way
You
to
mean
keep...
guilty?
Yeah, I mean guilty. Or innocent. I'm very nuanced. But yeah, if I don't want to see more planets like Alderaan blown to pieces, I could imagine doing something where innocents are killed out of desperation. But I would never frame it
I mean, he
as...
kisses his sister, so really, I don't expect much out of that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Is this supposed to be the hero? But framing it as you should literally have morals that sink to the level of all of your enemies or something. I think, I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I don't think that's how you should analyze morality. And I do think you should take a higher road than, you should have higher moral character than your enemies, and not hurt innocents unless, again, your back is against the wall and there's nothing else that you can do except, fire the torpedo down the womp rat hole or whatever the heck that was.
Yes, I agree exactly. That the statement itself just shocked me. Like I would think, if anything, it'd be the opposite and say the thing that makes you the good guys is that you have a higher moral code than the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, if you just say no, you have to adopt the same moral code as your enemies, then to me that's like, okay, so you guys are indistinguishable then. And I guess he would get into, well, they initiated, but okay. And again, the trouble with that is in practice, you can just go back. Like once you're born into a system in which there's some aggression and crime occurring, well, then you've just ensured that it's going to go on forever.
Yeah.
That there's no way to get out of that you're always going to be growing. Well, that guy, retaliated to me, right? In other words, if you're the kid that's, suffering the fallout because the grownups are following Stefan's advice, then you're going to start retaliating, and then some other guy's kid is going to receive it from you, and then they're going to grow. You know what I mean? So there's just no logical way that ever stops.
Yeah.
And then also too, again, not to beat a dead horse here, but the horse tried to beat me, in fairness.
And his kids.
Yes, it's like neither necessary nor sufficient for it to be okay to kill somebody's kids that he was first threatening mine, right? That
yeah.
If there's, someone threatens your kid, if there's a way you can neutralize him without threatening his kid, then clearly that's what you have to do. Clearly,
course.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no, you can't say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I could have just thrown a net around the guy, but I mean, he threatened my kid, so that's why I punched his 2-year-old in the face.
And I can't not do it because Stefan Molyneux said it just doesn't work if I don't do that.
Okay, so there's that, right? So clearly, just because they threaten your kid doesn't mean you therefore get to threaten their kid, right? That it'd be moral. It'd have to be. And then, again, come up with a crazy scenario, like some guy's coming up and he happens to have a kid right next to him, like his kid that he cares about. You don't have a kid, and he says, give me your wallet or I'm going to shoot you. And, you grab the kid or something and say, stand, get away from her, give me your gun or else I'm going to, do something bad to your kid. And he's like, oh crap, you got me. All right. And then he gives you the gun and you throw it away and then let the kid go. Right. You can imagine some kind of, so there, again, whether you think that's right or not, but notice if you do think that's okay, or you can see why someone's not a monster for saying, yeah, in a weird situation like that, okay, that the issue wasn't, oh, the reason it was okay for me to grab his kid and hold him hostage was because he did it to my kid. No, what if I don't have a kid? You get what I'm saying? So again, it's just, I'm showing the thing that's driving the result here is not the way Stefan's framing it. It is that that in the background, and the reason he's saying it doesn't work is he's assuming if you don't do these things that, the people, the pearl clutchers will say, no, you're not allowed to kill kids. That he's saying then you're doomed, that it's a suicide pact or something. So that's what's driving his result and making it sound reasonable, not all this stuff about, well, he kind of opened up the floodgates or he violated the rules, so therefore he can't cling to the rule.
Yeah. And there's something else he said in that brief little clip that just struck me as weird. And maybe it's not fair to throw rocks at a guy when he's speaking extemporaneously and trying to come up with an example. But like, what kind of weird street fight was he talking about that has rules? Is he talking like about a boxing match or something? I mean, if you're in a real fight, you're just fighting. There aren't any rules about no hitting low or whatever.
Well, what was it? Is it Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid where that happens?
I don't know.
Where Paul Newman's like, all right, now there's rules, see? And then he's like telling the guys the rules, and then he goes and kicks the guy in the nuts. As he kicks him in the nuts,
yeah, exactly. What are you even talking about? If we're no longer having discussion and trading like rational people, if we're fighting, then there aren't any rules. What are you even talking about? I just thought that was really weird. Anyway, that was it. Do you have anything else you want to say about this?
Sure. So here we've hyper-analyzed the specifics. And again, in fairness, I'm sure if he had time to reconsider, Stefan could have said it differently, and it probably would have been more defensible. But my take on morality in general is that it's, and I think Stefan even cited the prisoner's dilemma. Does that sound familiar? Did you listen to a bunch of it? I think he did. So anyway,
I think he did too.
Either
with, maybe he didn't do it in those terms, but he said in general, the way I treat new people is I treat them honorably, and as long as they do the same to me, it's great. But the second that they treat me dishonorably, then all bets are off, which is the prisoner's dilemma set over time, iterations.
And now let's take a break for a totally organic conversation about a great company.
Hey Adam, you were asking about fundraisers? You gotta check out the Swan Brothers. Their stuff actually moves. Hoodies, totes, the works.
What makes them different?
Frictionless. They spin up a clean, no-cost online store that looks legit. Then they handle everything: design, print, embroidery or engraving, fulfillment, shipping. You pick, they execute.
So it's not just shirts?
Way more. Apparel, drinkware, accessories. Premium brands, start to finish without babysitting.
So, like, who should be using them?
Bands, gyms, events, companies, anyone who wants merch that sells and shows up on time. Fast turns, volume pricing. Check out theswanbrothers.com/cross.
Okay, organic conversation over. Back to the show.
Yeah, so when I was in grad school, before I settled on capital interest theory, I had toyed with doing a dissertation that, would have been more marketable and stuff on this issue, like using the prisoner's dilemma and getting strategic scenarios like that to sort of explain like the dilemma with morality. And so for people who don't know, the prisoner's dilemma in its canonical form is the police catch two suspects and they put them in different rooms and they're interrogating them, and they say to each one, like, hey, we got a bunch of evidence on both of you, but we want you to confess. If you confess and your buddy doesn't, then you walk. If you guys both confess, then you both get a year or something like that. And then if neither one of you confesses, then we don't have anything, and you both go free or something like that. I screwed up the things, but it's supposed to be that no matter what the other guy does, you get a lower sentence if you confess. Okay, so I need to have calibrated. If you confess and the other guy doesn't, then you don't walk. You just get like 1 year or something. But the worst thing is if your buddy confesses and you don't, then you get 20 years. So it's something like that, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so the idea is you can run through put it a 2x2 grid and just look at, well, if my buddy confesses and I confess, it's better for me. If my buddy confesses and I don't confess, then it's bad for me. And then if he doesn't, and so the point is, no matter what your buddy does, you just do the math. And you do better if you confess than if you don't. And he does the same analysis, so you both confess. And the weirdness of it is you both do more time than if you could have both just kept your mouth shut. Okay, and so I think that isolates what's going on with morality in general, that weirdness where general moral rules, we are all better off if we live in a world where nobody lies and nobody steals and nobody murders. And yet, if everyone is practicing that, then on the margin, if somebody deviates from that, that person could be better off still, right? So if you're in a world where nobody lies, but then you do, like it's that Ricky Gervais movie, right? Where that would be amazing,
of lying.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Or nobody steals, but you just go whenever you can. You're at a dinner party or something, you go in to use the bathroom and you just grab jewels and stuff. Then that profits you, even though you would not want to live in a world where everyone acts like that, or even 10% of the people act like that, right? So that's the issue. And so then again, if you're what's interesting about it is if you try to explain just in purely rationalistic, egoistic terms to somebody why you shouldn't steal, it doesn't quite work to say, well, because if we all, if we lived in a world where nobody steals, you'd be better off, right? And you say, yeah, so I can't control what other people do, right? It's kind of like the logic with voting that we always fight about every election day. And so I'm saying it's like, oh, I wish I lived in a world where everyone felt this duty to do this thing that they want to be universalized, even though strictly speaking, you can't rationally convince anybody in cost benefit terms that you should follow this rule. And so, anyway, that's what I think, partly what's going on here. And again, it's, you can't convey it. And if someone just says, well, why should I be moral? It's hard to convince that person why. If you don't feel like, there's some rules that we should all follow, and if you don't feel a duty to it, I can't convince you otherwise. But still, that doesn't mean morality is wrong. I'm just saying there is that issue. And then the other thing, though, is with a lot of this stuff, it's, and free market economics informs my analysis on this, but I think you got a group of people, if they adhere to a bunch of rules that seem to tie their hands and prevent them from doing the obvious expedient thing, in the long run, they actually will be better off. Right? So with Stefan's free society, if they're allowed to act like that, they're not going to stay a free society for long. That if you're saying, oh no, if some outside entity threatens aggression against you, you're allowed to retaliate by threatening that guy's kids. Well, okay, there could be domestic bank robbers. So therefore we can tax everybody in order to fund a police force, in order to do right? And, I can come up with, using Stefan's arguments, I could come up with some way to justify that. And then to say, and also we're going to minimize theft too. So, right. So that's why it's justified that the principle's on the table. You can't say, taxation's theft. No, we've got thieves. So that's out the window. Right. And so anyway, I realize there's more steps to the argument to get in there, but if the thieves have families and then they're threatening to steal from my family, I can steal from his family. So that's how I just justify taxation. Where the thieves have friends and they're going to steal from my friends. So I can, so I'm just saying Stefan's thing opens up a whole bunch of stuff you're allowed to do.
Of course, yeah. And again, I think you hurt yourself when you act immorally, even if you are the only one doing it. One of these days, we should probably just have an episode that's just about game theory. Because fortunately, I play poker
and I'll
for a
probably
living.
write out the payoffs before I try to do it on the fly and realize as I'm going through it.
Of course,
why wouldn't the prisoners just keep their mouths shut the way I just constructed that? Okay.
I play games for a living, so I think about these things a lot. And the few game theory studies that I've looked at, it's the models don't accurately put everything in there that's appropriate for humanity, and it's a good thing. Like you'll see people act within the game in a way that does not maximize their return.
Awesome.
Because they don't think that fairness has ensued, and so they'll just stand on principle and say, no, I don't want to live in that world. And I think that's good.
Folks, you have just seen the brainstorming. This is how we plan. Yes, let's do that, because I have some game theory was my field at NYU. That's sort of like major. So yes, I can go over some stuff that's extremely counter. And also there's one of my favorite stories about how insane the mathematical economists are. So we will cover that. All that and more, folks.
All that and more. All right, let's move along to one Tucker Carlson talking about MAGA and its 5 pillars. Do you want to set this up in any particular way?
This was this one was viewer recommended. Somebody, sorry, sir, it was a guy. Actually, I think it was Declaration of Memes. It was the account, because I said, should I thank you? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what's your name? And I don't know if he just didn't tell me or what. But anyway, saying, hey, there's some good fodder here for you and Adam in your next crossover. Anyway, the episode this is from recently, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene was the guest on the episode. But folks, as Tucker sometimes does, he does like a huge monologue first before he has the guest on. And so in this one, he was summarizing the 5 pillars of the Trump presidency. Is that what, or MAGA, maybe?
He called it 5 pillars of MAGA, which are America first, secure the border, stop having pointless wars, globalization sucks, it's bad for America and American workers, so bring the jobs back home. And the last one is free speech, no exceptions. And I don't think he says that specifically in any of the clips that we chose, but that was what he was talking about, those 5 pillars, and people who are supporting them and the people who aren't.
Yep. And so how many clips do we have? There's 1 or 2?
2.
Okay, so we got 2 clips of that will set things up nicely, and we'll discuss.
All right, let her rip.
America first will be the major and overriding theme of my administration. April 27th, 2016. At the time, Donald Trump had been elected to nothing. He'd not even officially secured the nomination. Ted Cruz was still running against him until the Indiana primary the next month. He was still just a candidate, totally unproven. But the central theme of the next 10 years of his political life and of the country's political life is right there in that clip, America First. The purpose and duty of the American government is to represent the United States of America. Another way to put it would be the duty of the U.S. government is to make good on the core promise of democracy, which is that the country operates on behalf of its owners, the citizens of that country. It would seem very obvious. Of course, Trump was attacked for it immediately. He was called an anti-Semite. You may not remember this, but he was, because he used a phrase that Charles Lindbergh, who was, by the way, not an anti-Semite, but who did oppose American entry into World War II, along with tens of millions of other Americans, used very often. The America First movement was the American movement of the late 1930s, early 1940s, pushing the Roosevelt administration away from joining a war in Europe. It doesn't mean they were pro-Nazi. Many of them were very anti-Nazi, but they didn't think the United States had a role in that war, and they said it. And probably the most famous living American at the time, Charles Lindbergh, who in 1927 flew across the Atlantic Ocean solo, truly a hero, was the leader of this movement. And of course, history being what it is, rewritten by the victors, he has been slandered ever since as some sort of hater or pro-Hitler, anti-Semite or something. He was none of the above.
All right.
Okay, so
what do you got to say about
sure.
that?
So the reason, it's funny, at first I forgot what the first clip was, and I was looking at the notes I sent you, and I still, and then when you started, oh yeah, I remember what point I wanted to make. Okay, so the reason I wanted to include that, Adam, is it syncs with, our take on Nick Fuentes that we did it on the previous crossover, and then for folks that listen to the Bob Murphy Show, I did a standalone response, and then I'm actually toying with doing another one. I think I have one more in me in terms of getting out my thoughts on this topic, but let me here just summarize one of the main points I think needs to be stressed. I'm not the only one saying this, but I'm in a minority view. Like, I've just seen a handful of people making this distinction that what is happening here, and it's convenient for both sides. It's sort of like a Baptist and bootleggers thing, that who is it that wants people to think opposition to foreign wars, particularly wars that the government of Israel might want the U.S. to be in, who wants people to conflate that with hating Jewish people per se? Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, what's his face, Lindsey Graham, right? They certainly want those two to go together, so that anybody who opposes like the neocon agenda, so you hate Jewish people and you think Hitler was cool, right? They want that. But you know who else wants to mix those two things? Guys like Nick Fuentes.
Right.
People who actually, I don't know what he thinks in his heart, but certainly his shtick is, oh yeah, we got to watch out for these perfidious Jews. That's an exact quote.
That is an exact quote. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm saying for those, that are the 95% of the people, that are the anti-interventionists and who just get outraged and, this is such a dirty, woke smear tactic that just because we're saying the U.S. government should not be funding Israel's wars, that therefore it's because we don't like Jewish people or something. That's crazy. Why would you say that? And I'm saying it's not crazy when, there are people on the shows who openly say that stuff all the time, and nobody takes the time to say, right, yeah, he's saying that, but we're not saying that, right? So anyway, I'm just saying that I think there's the people, the anti-interventionists should be a little more careful about making that clear. And if they just go along, oh, here we go again, that's not unreasonable. Or for example, a different, to make it concrete, is the fallout or the reaction over the Heritage Foundation guy. I forget the guy's name, right? So he came out in support of Tucker Carlson, which I commend him for. And I agree. Like, I think Tucker having Nick on is fine. So don't misunderstand me, folks. I'm not saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe Tucker Carlson platformed him. It's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is the people who are flipping out about him having Nick Fuentes on and saying he is platforming a vicious anti-Semite, and then the reaction to that is to say, oh, come on, just saying that we shouldn't support Israel's wars isn't anti-Semitism. That makes it look like you don't like you're pretending, right? It makes it look like you all know what's going on and you're sweeping it. You know what I mean? Like, you're justifying all the people talking about dog whistles and stuff when you talk like that. And again, I think what's going on is people are like, oh, let's not get distracted about what Nick Fuentes may have said on his podcast 2 years ago or so, right? I get it, and why strategically some people, what I'm saying, I think you are actually unwittingly solidifying that claim that, yes, in American politics right now, there's two groups, the people that don't like Jewish people and don't want us to support Israel's wars, and the people that do like Jewish people and want to help the Israeli government. And that you're serving that, making it down into just a binary. And specifically what prompted that was the America First thing, right? Because that's Nick Fuentes, is the name of his show.
Right.
It's America First. And so for people who are, saying, oh, yes, Nick Fuentes is like Clinton Russell said it. Look, I love his show lately. He's been killing it. But he was like, oh, yes, Nick Fuentes conquered Turning Point USA without firing a shot. Because look at all these questions, to J.D. Vance coming from these kids who are questioning. And again, they weren't saying, are you sure 6 million people died? That's not what they were asking. They were asking very legitimate stuff. So I'm saying, by describing that as Nick Fuentes won, you're just on a silver platter giving to the critics the notion that, oh yeah, all these people saying, oh, we just don't understand why we're supporting these wars, and we have nothing but love in our hearts for the Jewish people. What are you talking about? And this is like, oh, okay, sure. So anyway, that's my narrow point of that. And because I remember when Josh Hammer months ago had some article where he was saying, these guys like Dave Smith are trying to use the phrase America First as if that means the U.S. should be non-interventionist, when no, that's not what it's supposed to mean. I was like, what are you talking about? Right? But then when you try to link it to the actual original America First, then it's like, oh yeah, because those guys liked the Nazis. That's why they were against it. So I'm just saying this goes way back, and it's a common move, and so let's not just give them that point or something.
Yeah, that was it's a weirder dynamic when the Israel issue gets conflated in there. But I had the same notes on that clip as you did, basically. The original America Firsters were called, pro-Nazi and anti-Semitic at the time. But, if you don't think we should be involved in Eastern Europe and Ukraine, then you're pro-Putin. If you didn't think the Iraq War II was wise, then you just loved Saddam. And, so these slurs just come with the territory. But this one is weird and sticky, and it flips around because apparently there's people like Nick Fuentes out there. And the only other point I had on that first clip is just that...
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, of course.
Because, again, I don't want to be misunderstood. The thing with the guy from the Heritage Foundation, do you know what that guy's name is?
I don't know.
Is it Kevin Alexander? I want to say that. Okay. Maybe
I'm drawing a blank. Yeah.
If only we had some method by which we could answer it. Do you mind looking that up while give me a cup of coffee while you're at it, Toots? So he, for people who don't know what's the context here is, again, people were calling for Tucker Carlson to, someone even said neutralized when he had Fuentes on. And again, Tucker did push back on several points and said, I think as a Christian, I'm commanded to treat people as individuals. And, so it wasn't like a bunch of softballs. And so people were calling for Tucker to be demonized and, ostracized. And so the president of the Heritage Foundation comes out and says, issues a statement saying many have called for us to distance ourselves. I'm not going to do that. And because, questioning,
Kevin Roberts.
Okay. So I was right. Questioning Israel or the U.S. government's support of Israel is not anti-Semitism. And he's going through. And so again, all true statements. I just think it would have been better for him if he had clarified it like 7 seconds into it to say, now, yes, Nick Fuentes has said incredibly anti-Semitic things and Tucker was pushing back against it in the very interview under dispute. So having said that, right, but he didn't, to me, it looked like he was trying to defend Tucker and just stick narrowly to that particular thing without pissing off Knicks fans. That's what it looked like to me, like he was trying to do, which I understand why you would do that. But then that's why guys like Jonah Goldberg and stuff looked at that and were shocked and appalled and say, this is the most cowardly, sniveling, blah, 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 right? So I didn't think it was cowardly and sniveling, but I can understand why someone with Jonah's mindset would think that. Yeah. Because how can you sit there and pretend that the reason we're upset is that somebody went on Tucker's show saying, I question U.S. taxpayer support for Israel's wars, when no, it's because he makes oven jokes about the Holocaust and stuff, or he does do that too. That's what I should say. When I say it's because, I make it sound like I know what their real motivation is, okay? But my point is, on the surface, it's difficult to say, oh, come on, you guys don't really think he's an anti-Semite. Really what you think when Nick says the stuff he says. And there's a ton of stuff, folks. So that's the other irony. He's like, now people just playing these clips and Nick's complaining about being quoted. Yeah, I'm sorry, on your show people quote you and say what you said. So I guess that's like one of those dirty tricks from those people.
Yeah, exactly. Quoting what I said, taking in context. It's crazy. Do you want to move on to clip 2?
No, I really want to just make sure we alienate people. No, yes,
well,
go ahead.
This comes natural.
It was Ron DeSantis or it was Nikki Haley who was busy telling us that we need Israel more than Israel needs us, and other things that were so nonsensical and insane that no one dared ask her to explain them. Those were the favorites, the anti-Trumps, the candidates who are going to undo the damage that Trump had done to our sacred alliances with NATO and other countries we have literally nothing to do with and almost no common interest with, but to whom we send billions and billions and billions, tens, hundreds over the years of billions of dollars to do what? To bring gay rights to Lithuania or something? It's not even clear. But a lot of people in Washington are getting rich from these multinational organizations, these peacekeeping organizations, and a lot of highly ideological foreign policy establishment figures who do not have America's interests first in mind and never have, use those wars for their own ends, which again are not related to America's interests on any level. In fact, run directly contrary to America's interests, hurt America. And so at the moment when Trump was about to go to jail, it looked like, and fighting against what seemed like a wave of donor investment in Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, he comes out and says, no, I'm the opposite. No more wars. And guess what happened? He won the nomination and he won the presidency again. So anyone who would say, well, that wasn't an important part of his platform, that's not actually a pillar, right? This just happened. We remember it and it's on tape. No more wars, pillar 3. Pillar 4, how about some real jobs? Donald Trump, from day one, 2015, the famous escalator ride, in fact, going back 40 years in his CNN appearances, for example, with Larry King, or his work on ABC, would almost always make the same point in various ways, but it was the same point, which was globalization shortchanges America. It helps bankers. It helps the finance class quite a bit. Once you financialize things in a globalized economy, money moves much more easily. There's much less friction. And a small number of people get very, very rich, but the country itself becomes a husk. It becomes hollowed out. There's nothing for people to do. And a country that doesn't make anything is not a real country. Everyone sort of knows this intuitively, but libertarian economists basically doing the bidding of the finance class have for the past 40 years told us, no, it's totally fine because it hikes GDP. Oh, GDP. As if GDP is the only or even the best measure of the health of an economy or the health of a nation or the health of its people. And of course, that's ridiculous. GDP is the measure of all economic activity. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, not much, actually. A country that doesn't make anything, a country that has, say, 6 thriving cities and the rest of the continent falling into poverty is not a thriving country. It's a dying country.
Bob, I had no idea that you have been secretly running the economy for the benefit of these huge financial interests. How dare you?
Well, once we set up the deposit from Cutter's bank into mine.
You're gonna cut me in here, right?
I'll talk about globalization. Yeah. So can
Did
I
you
just
hear,
sorry, go ahead.
Did you hear Elon Musk on Joe Rogan here recently?
No.
He told a pretty funny joke. I feel like I should repurpose here because Tucker's making fun of GDP as a measure of prosperity, and I agree. I think it's terrible. I think you do too. But Elon tells this joke. These two economists or friends are going out for a hike in the woods. Not economists like you, Bob. Standard regime economists. Fuddy-duddies who don't know nothing. Anyway, they're walking along, and they come upon, in the middle of the trail, this steaming pile of poop. So the one economist says to his buddy, "Hey, you eat that, and I'll give you $100." So he does. He gets paid the $100, and they keep walking. First economist is like, "Ha ha ha! I got you to eat poop." They walk a little further and come upon another steaming pile of poop in the middle of the trail, and the other economist says, "Hey, you eat that, and I'll give you $100." And he does. So they keep walking along, and then one of them stops the other and says, both of us have just eaten steaming piles of poop. And when you think about the way the money moved around, you paid me and I paid you, nothing really happened except we ate poop. The other economist says, what are you talking about? We created 2 jobs and increased GDP by $200.
Yeah, I've heard that joke.
Huge applause, laugh line. Anyway, so I just wanted to ask you obviously libertarianism hasn't rung amok and we don't have a free market in anything, but do people point to GDP stupidly or the stock market stupidly as a poor gauge of how well the American economy is doing?
I suppose some do, but the particular move that he made there, that didn't sound right to me, to say an economist defending and it wasn't clear exactly what government policies do they have in mind. So if it's just saying, no, it's whatever caused globalization, because there's lots of things that, Chairman Mao, dying and then them moving away from, China becoming more market oriented, that also promoted globalization. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. The innovations with the, it was a big deal. I can't think of the guy's name, but you know how you see those things in the back of 18-wheelers? The big rectangular things?
To make a more fuel efficient.
No. I'm blanking.
About?
That you put the merchandise in. The containers. That's the word I was looking for.
Wow.
And so when the ship, where I'm coming from though is that was an innovation. That apparently there was some guy, I think in the 50s or something, and he drove a truck. And so when the ships would come in with all the stuff that was just packed in weird ways, and then it would just be a huge line of trucks, and it would take forever for the dock workers to unload and load the truck. And he had the idea that, if we just had standardized containers and just stack those things, and it'd be real. So I'm saying that promoted globalization too. Is that, does Tucker think that makes everybody poorer? And that, now we're that's why there's 6 cities and, LA has dung because no. So I would need him to be clearer about what specifically you have a problem with. But
I wish I'd clipped the exact thing, but he said things like not that regulations made labor too expensive, so these jobs got outsourced, but that the CEOs were paid off or something to get rid of the companies or something. He was making a bunch of conspiratorial things,
and they sold their companies bit by bit or something.
Yeah, something like that.
So anyway, to your original question, no, in general, if you ask a standard economist, certainly a libertarian economist, why is free trade good? He wouldn't say, because that maximizes GDP. He absolutely would not say that. And if you said, why is a tariff bad? He wouldn't say because it lowers GDP. He absolutely would not say that. Now, the stuff he said you could try to argue would be indirectly related, but that's because the things he would say would be it lowers the average standard of living of Americans. And then that would be correlated and say, and I guess by implication that would lower real GDP, right? But it's In other words, if Tucker's saying, hey, we want to have good paying jobs for Americans, right, so what do libertarian economists say? Right, and that's why tariffs are bad, is because they would lower the real wages of American workers. Okay, so maybe they're wrong, but I'm saying the standard free market economist argument against tariffs is not that, oh yeah, they would definitely make workers better off, but we care about the capitalists, and they're the ones funding our bankroll. That no, the argument is, yeah, you can help. You put a tariff against Japanese cars, you can help Detroit auto workers, but then you make every other worker poorer because now their cars are more expensive or crappier. And
let me try to steel man his argument a little bit.
What kind of steel? Where are you getting it from?
Yeah, it's that fake Nipponese. Okay, so we think the way to, if it's artificially, if regulations and minimum wage laws and red tape and all the other horrible things that, if those are the things that have outsourced American jobs that are artificial creations of government, if that's the case, and even though you, Bob, control the American economy, I mean, libertarian economists, they control everything. But if you're not allowed to strip away all those regulations in order to make the economy more healthy that way and more competitive, is there any sense then, since this is a weird, perilous mixed economy, that given that we have to suffer all these regulations and red tape and artificially high labor costs, that therefore we should block globalism and raise tariffs in order to be, I mean, we're already going to be screwed anyway. Is there some way we can salvage what jobs we have left, or you know what I'm getting at? Is there some sort of a half measure? Please don't kill the host, because we're getting beat up here. Is there any way you could make two wrongs make a right in some limited sense?
I understand what you're asking. For example, let me admit this: that when people bring up the really specific, nuanced examples, yeah, Bob, we understand in general crude mercantilism is goofy. We're not talking about that. We're talking about stuff like magnets and things like that, these rare earths and stuff like that. That it just doesn't make sense for the U.S. to produce them, just given the costs and whatnot. It makes sense to import them, left to market forces. But then if we get into a war, we're screwed, right? Because they could just cut off the supply. And so that's why the government should, subsidize it or, put a price floor. Those are the kind of arguments they give to make it. And so the standard argument I would give to that is to say, well, if we're talking about like Ancapistan, and you want to say, oh, does that mean unless they happen to have, natural endowment of these rare earths or whatever, they would be a sitting duck, and therefore anarcho-capitalism can't work for such a work because they need tariffs? I would say no, because pure market, you could build silos and whatever and just stockpile those things, right? It's not that the rare earths have, a 2-week lifespan or something. You can stockpile that stuff and import it while there's peacetime and it's, rock bottom prices, and that's why we don't produce it domestically, because it's cheaper to import it. Okay, and then you stockpile it, and then they could build factories with, and put them on mothballs or have them make something else as a loss leader or whatever, because they just know, oh, if we ever do go to war, then we can produce and, earn triple the rates and whatever, because prices will go through the roof, and that all makes sense. So whatever argument you would use as to why subsidizing it or whatever is smart in the long run, that logic would also explain why having the spare capacity and building up the silos and stockpiling them wherever works in the short run, or for a free society as well. But the only way that works is if we do go to war, and then the price quintuples, that the speculators, the people who stockpiled it in silos for years, are allowed to sell it 5 times the old price, because that's what justifies them building the silos and stockpiling it and whatever, or having the factories ready to flip a switch, and then they switch from making widgets to making magnets or whatever, right? So, and then you could say we don't live in that world right now. That right now, if speculators stockpiled these things and then we went to war with China and the price skyrocketed and these guys are trying to sell it at 5 times what the price was before the war broke out, do you think the government would just say, oh, hey, okay, well, fair's fair, property rights for the win? No, they'd say there's a war going on. We're going to commandeer that. We're going to pay you for it, but we're going to pay you what the old price was, right? We're not going to let you profiteer and
Right.
So I could see in scenarios like that where you could say, Bob, given that we live in this world and not an anarcho-capitalist utopia, yes, there's like, two wrongs make a right. That given that the government is going to have price controls or whatever at wartime and not let people engage in war profiteering, then we have to also subsidize and have a domestic stockpile of, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and blah, 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 and all this stuff ready because, the normal market forces will not be allowed to operate if a war breaks out. And that's why the government also has to now enhance preparedness. So I can say something like that, but even there, I don't think there's any way you're going to get me to say, yes, a blanket 20% tariff makes sense for those types of reasons. If you want to have a blanket tariff of 20% so you can get rid of the income tax, okay. And then the sort of background intervention, Adam, would just be, well, given that we have all this government spending that we have to pay for somehow, could tariffs make sense? And I would say, yeah, sure. But so that's the kind of way I would answer you. So yes, in principle, a second best thing could make sense, but I don't even think with the competitiveness and things like that it's because again, another issue is, okay, so yeah, geez, there's all these labor and environmental regulations and how the heck am I supposed to have a factory? But another thing that you need to run a factory is you have to get inputs, and many of which would come from abroad. And so by making all of your inputs 30% more expensive at the border, that's not helping U.S. competitiveness either. So,
I can steel man Tucker's position a little more. We didn't even have a war in 2020, and we learned how fragile these supply chains are that rely on things coming from China and elsewhere. And it just seems like these libertarian economists, they're chasing the efficiencies in the dollar, and they've thought about why we want our nation to be much more robust and not fragile to these, these shocks. So it just makes sense that the government would force everybody to bring these long supply chains back, at least over to this side of the world, maybe do things in Mexico or South America. But what in the world were these supposedly free market CEOs? They're just chasing their next quarterly profits, and they're not thinking about the health and the supply of the nation's productivity or something like that.
So that's true insofar as it goes, but I would say two things. So one is, I think lots of people were shocked by COVID and what happened, right? So it wasn't that we had laissez-faire capitalism as of 2019. And then 2020 showed, damn, that experiment in radical libertarianism blew up in our face. No, we had a heavily regulated sector, all sorts of different ways as of 2019. Okay, so in other words, the U.S. government already told us we are not going to allow the wild, wild west of unregulated capitalism. That's why we have OSHA and the FDA and the IRS and EPA and we have all of these, NAFTA and this and all these trade agreements with all the, NAFTA doesn't just say tariff rates are this level. Like it has all sorts of international bodies of regulations and blah, blah, harmonization of regulation, right? So we have all that stuff and still, the store shelves were empty because of COVID. Okay, so I'm saying that didn't work. So people were shocked and then say, okay, because now people were surprised and didn't realize, oh, geez, we were actually much more vulnerable in 2019 than we realized. Going forward, what's the best way to adapt to that? I would say let each business owner decide, hey, in light of that shock, should we consider maybe, getting our sourcing from a plant in Mexico rather than Indonesia? And let's see how that works out, or even Cincinnati for that matter, right? So I think businesses were surprised and, did that. Like people learn and stuff is surprising. So there's that element. But then also, too, if you say, why is it that big corporations seem to be so short-sighted? I would say it's stuff like, well, because you've got the Fed that can just quadruple the monetary base in a couple of years based on some crisis, and there's bailouts and things like that. So, didn't the response to 2008 show that if you were a big financial institution in 2005 and you were like, these home prices seem kind of crazy, I think we should shy away from all these mortgage-backed securities and, CDOs and stuff, it's not obvious that you made the right move because, again, a lot of the big boys were bailed out. Yeah. The ones that weren't politically connected were allowed to fail, don't get me wrong. But so I'm just saying, when we wonder why is it that, these big corporations just catering to the next quarterly report, that also is not the result of unfettered capitalism.
I have a recommendation since you're so very active on these social medias. Since libertarian economists are being blamed for getting us in the position that we're in, we're just so, high pie in the sky, got your head in the clouds. Maybe you should go ahead and circulate a list of policy prescriptions. I know you guys think we're the reason that everything has gone wrong, but just so you know, these are the things I think the government should do in order to have a prosperous economy. And notice that none of these on the list are being enacted right now.
It could be that. So the reason I joined those two items, those two pillars, in that last clip there, like where he was talking about that foreign intervention and this and that, and these NGOs and blah blah blah, and it's good for them, but it's not. And then so I understand why in Tucker's mind those two things flow together quite naturally, and he's looking at there's these globalist elites with these organizations that don't have any allegiance to the United States as such, and they're just stealing everything that isn't nailed down in this country and shipping it abroad. And so I get why in his mind it's the same thing. I also understand why he doesn't trust the economists at DC-based think tanks. I largely don't either, right? So it's, and in fairness, a lot of them call themselves libertarians, right? So it's, in fairness, Tucker might, if he heard this rant or something, he could say, what are you talking about here? Have his staff give me 16 white papers from various libertarian economists that, advocate for NAFTA and blah, blah, blah. And say, see, this isn't just, free. This is globalized, managed trade. And there's all these international organizations and busybodies, right? So I get that. Yeah. And then in fact, what like the leftists refer to as like the neoliberal agenda or something where, there's some country that's in a financial crisis, like in South America, and then the IMF and the World Bank and the UN come in and they make them sweetheart loans and this and that, and they say, now you got to cut spending and you got to deregulate your commodity prices and stuff like that, and you got to let us come in and let us buy your real estate, and we'll come in and and we got to mine your get some of your oil, and then we'll give you this loan, and then be on onerous terms and so forth, right? So I understand why everyone's skeptical of that. And unfortunately, they say, yeah, that's capitalism, right? That's to me the issue.
Well, that's why I think it would be really helpful, just a 15-point list. You guys seem confused about what a free market is supposed to be. Yeah, it's this stuff.
But even on its own terms, though, I would want to say to somebody who agrees with Tucker, and they're like, yeah, I'm just seeing it's the same thing over and over in these different facets of life. That notice, though, there's a huge difference between him talking about no more foreign wars and support for foreign governments, and then pivoting to, and then what's up with this globalization and free trade and all this stuff. That with the first thing, it's the government is taxing people, taking money from them, and then paying entities to start wars or sending bombs and stuff abroad and giving money to NGOs, and that's how the Americans are being fleeced. When it comes to free trade, if it were actually correct and true, that would just mean the government wouldn't do anything and just let people do what they wanted, right? And so you see how that's kind of different. And in fact, we say, well, no, what if we have tariffs to protect jobs? Tariffs would be taxing people, and the revenue is collected internally. The foreigners might bear some of the burden of that, right? And then dispersing it out to politically favored entities, right? So I'm saying in practice, it's funny that he has this idea. I guess what I'm saying is like isolationism in terms of foreign policy is actually the same thing as free trade is in terms of trade policy.
That's a great point.
Even though you would think, no, isolationism means we don't trade with anybody else. And no, that's not what that would mean.
Great point. But it is funny from his sort of cockeyed perspective. It is vexing. He taxes the citizenry to pay an arms manufacturer for a bomb that you fly over and drop on some other country. And then cha-ching, cha-ching, GDP just went up. It's like, what? That's not a good idea.
So at the risk of, if you have to explain a joke, it's not funny, but I think for the record, can I explain why that joke actually doesn't work?
That is what makes jokes better. Yeah, you go right ahead.
Okay. Let me change it and say, two massage therapists are walking and each of them has a crank in their back and one says, here, I'll give you a massage for $100. And the guy says, okay. And he does it and gives a real full body massage. Oh, that's awesome. And they're walking. They're like, oh, geez. Hey, I'll give you a massage for $100. Okay. And he does it. It's great, and they're walking, and then really they're kind of just the same. I mean, all they did was pass a $100 bill back and forth and, run their fingers. That doesn't follow. It's like, no, they just genuinely helped each other, and that's great. Right? And so why does that work? And why would the 200 of real GDP of massage services be meaningful in that thing and not crazy? It's because each person valued getting the massage more than the labor, than the disutility of the labor involved. Okay. And so with the first thing, if it actually is the case that you valued watching some guy eat poop more than your $100, right? Because if you didn't, then why did you pay him $100 to do it? And then the guy had the similar preferences and he just got more enjoyment from watching you eat poop than the $100. When all was said and done, yes, GDP was higher because for some reason these two sadomasochists
That's a great point.
enjoy watching their neighbor eat poop more than the distaste of getting it in their belly.
When I retell this joke the next time, it's going to be the government that makes the payments, not each individual according to his preferences. That's duly noted.
Yep. So I've just said yes, I'll see it, and I say yeah, GDP went up, and it correctly shows that those people are better off according to their own odd preferences.
I sit corrected. Do you have any?
If there were like two flies buzzing around and said, "Oh, look there's some dung. Let's go land on that." That wouldn't be a weird story. I mean, I don't know how they're gonna have $100 bills. It'd be hard to move, but.
I just thought I'd let that sit there flat. By the way, I'm going to have Tyrone, when I tell the joke, he's going to go back and insert this huge audience applause break. It's going to be amazing. You can't leave me sitting here flat, Bob Murphy. So is that it? Shall we say goodbye to these fine folks? Have you explained all the points?
I think so.
Sweet. If you all are listening and watching on Heyman Nature, that's great. I love you. Please go check out the Bob Murphy Show. Yes.
For any gripers out there, I've got $100 to pay you to do something. If you're getting tempted to push back on this show.
Ooh, where else can you get entertainment, education, and a sweet financial offer? And if it's the other way around, please go check out my YouTube channel, Heyman Nature. I have other episodes that don't even have Bob on them. And check out my Substack on HeymanNature.com. That's Haman. I write. Thanks, Bob. That was wonderful. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks a lot, folks.
You've just experienced another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. For more information and to subscribe to this podcast, visit bobmurphyshow.com.